Thank you for joining today's virtual workshop hosted by Silvertree Consulting Services. We are excited for a roundtable discussion on the disruptors, artificial intelligence and machine learning. I will be sending out a recording after the event, and if you have any questions, we'll connect you to our presenters here. So without any further ado, I will turn it over to Richard Ricks with Silvertree.
Thank you so much, Emily, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. As Emily said, I think we all know in the world we live in, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the enabling data is truly disrupting the way business and IT operations are executed. So we're very pleased to be able to bring to you this morning this workshop. I'm joined today by three very knowledgeable individuals that I have known for quite a while. I've had the blessing of working with them, and they are transformation leaders without a doubt. And so I'd like to start with the introductions. But before I do that, I'd like to encourage the audience to ask any questions that you may have. You know, this is a session for us to give back to the members of the North Carolina Tech Association. So we're eager to answer any of your questions as it relates to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and how the data we all use enables those technologies. So as Emily said, without any further ado, let me introduce the panel. So today we have Tom Peach. Tom was the previous CIO at Zurich North America, a $15 to $20 billion insurance company. He's currently the CIO at James River, which is based here in Raleigh and in Richmond. And Tom has, throughout his career, been a transformational leader. So he'll talk a bit about how that's changing the James River business, but more specifically about how it's impacting the insurance industry as we get into the opening comments. Also with us, we have Manish Tomar. Manish Tomar worked with me at CSC, and the reason I raised that is he ran a $2 billion digital business at CSC. So he's had the pleasure of sitting on the service provider side and now on the CIO side, where he was the CIO at Grant Thornton, a well-known tax advisory company, consulting company, as well as he is the CIO and Chief Digital Officer of KPMG globally. Manish's role is an interesting role in that he's developing products and solutions that are used both by the KPMG partners and associates, but also by the customers of KPMG. So he'll bring a lot of insight as to how AI, ML, and data is impacting KPMG and their clientele. The third panelist is one of the top innovators that I've had the pleasure of working with in the IT services industry. Sam Gross is the founder and CEO of ChoiceWorks. ChoiceWorks is an AI company focused on IT operations automation. And Sam's background was the CTO at CSC for all end-user compute, digital workplace, if you will, at Unisys and at CompuCom before he decided to found ChoiceWorks and become a true leader in innovation as it relates to IT ops using AI and ML technology. So we're very blessed to have these panelists, and they are eager to answer your questions. So don't hesitate to ask them. So what I'd like to do is just to kind of get things started and to loosen up, if you will, is to have Tom, Manish, and Sam to make some opening comments. But before I do that, I should introduce myself. I'm Richard Ricks. I'm the founder and CEO of Silvertree Consulting and Services. Silvertree Consulting and IT Transformation. I come from a long, extensive history of leading transformations, and really transformational leadership is what Silvertree is all about. So we're excited to talk about AI, ML, and how data enables those technologies to transform the way we do business. So over to Tom Peach. Tom, why don't you give the audience just an overview, high-level perspective on how these technologies, AI, and ML, and data is changing the insurance industry, and any other comments you'd like to make in opening. So over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks for the time. Thanks for everybody to join this and listen to our thinking on this. So So as Richard said, I've spent a career in the financial services industry, and I would have to say that this industry is probably the best industry for manipulation of data, which lends itself incredibly to all the AI, ML strategies, data analytics, and things like that. Because insurance companies are, it's all about the data. We don't put out a tangible product other than a piece of paper, a contract, per se, and things like that. So it's all about, how do we manipulate data? How do we just do a really good job with it? So just a quick little dive into the insurance industry for those folks, just a little orientation. There are three things the industry wants to do. Only three things. They want to be able to procure business, right? And they want to make sure that business is a good risk, right? So how do you know it's a good risk other than it may be your neighbor or whatever the case is? It's all about data. The second piece is we want to be able to pay your claim. I mean, it's pretty simple. Get it in the door. How do we pay the claim? And then the most important piece that we want to do is we want to do it as efficiently as we possibly can. How do we, the competition in the insurance sector is about writing the good risk, but making it efficient, doing it at a cheaper cost than our competitors, but also making sure that our customers are really getting what they would need. And again, you'll just see a lot more, as we'll get into some of the discussion items of all the various places that we can put automated artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the data analytics aspects of it. So, Richard, I'll just tee it up for the rest of the Q&A from there.
Thank you, Tom. Insurance obviously is ripe for AI and ML, and we'll look forward to talking about it a bit more. Manish, over to you. How about giving the audience a perspective of how AI, ML, and data and analytics is impacting the KPMG operation, but also the clients of KPMG and the industry at large? Just some opening comments to get the audience warmed up. Over to you, Manish.
Thank you, Richard, and good morning, everyone. As Richard teed this off, and I think Tom alluded to, AI/ML has become a key strategic objective of major organizations today out there. It's either in works or organizations are planning to make sure that it remains as a key priority and focus as we move forward and in our journey ahead. AI/ML, again, the way it is being leveraged in many ways, but some of the objectives that organizations are really working towards fulfilling is around enhancing the unified and personalized client experience, how it can be leveraged to drive operational excellence and efficiencies through intelligent automation, combined with cloud capabilities, how it can really enable organizations to operate with speed and agility to achieve their objectives in terms of serving their customers, serving the employees, shareholders, and so forth. It's really about how it can be leveraged to manage quality and the risk exposure and overall risk management for the organization. I think Tom alluded that in the context of insurance industry, but you can think about across industry segment. It's very applicable today in terms of how organizations are leveraging the AI/ML capabilities to manage risk exposure and the overall quality of experience that they create for their consumers and customers. The underlying foundation of AI/ML capability is very much driven by the power of data, and really that how that data is consumed, data is managed, governed, cleansed, so that it can really provide a robust, predictable insights through the means of AI/ML capabilities. And last but not the least, I would say, really in the context of not just professional services firm, but also if we look at as an impact of pandemic currently, there is a shortage of workforce laborers across industry segment today, especially services industry, professional services. I think organizations are seeing a spike in attrition, and AI/ML capabilities bring some of those, you can say, stopgap in terms of how we, do an effective workforce management where we can reskill, retool our current workforce, move them up the value chain, while some of the work that they have been traditionally doing can be really fulfilled through AI/ML capabilities. So it's becoming very powerful, especially in the context of where several industry segments are moving forward, how we are really trying to create that unique differentiation in the marketplace. how we are trying to really drive that personalized experience, enhanced experience for our consumers. A couple of things that I want to really focus also on outside of the objective itself. As much as it sounds very simple and we think through the layer of AI ML, there's some really basic foundational capabilities that's really required for organization to be successful if they're thinking about really deploying AI ML capabilities. I would start with really, again, the foundation of data and making sure, I think many organizations sit with tons of information data, both internal, external, but really don't know what to do with it. And really effectively managing data, governing it, making sure it's cleansed through to really get meaningful information that can really make these bots more smart in terms of how they consume it. It's also about, AI ML capabilities is in some respect, and I call it evolution process that we have to go through. It's not a switch on and off where one day the bots become overly smart and can do exactly what they were expected to do. So how do you really train them effectively? How do you really make sure the knowledge artifacts that feeds into these AI ML platforms are actually consumed appropriately? How do you put controls and governance and quality aspects around it to really manage and learn from the mistakes of these bots to make them smarter over a period of time? And then make sure that that overall training of these bots are effective so that the experience that they create and over a period of time as they get smarter, they can really fulfill more and more requirements of the businesses. Last but not the least, I talked about workforce a little bit when we were talking about objectives. It's also important. Organizations today are struggling to find good talents to really build these capabilities, both on the data side as well as on the AI ML technology. So how do we really work towards not just looking for, from the market resources who already have the capabilities, but also retooling and reskilling and upskilling the workforce that we have in terms of really getting them ready for the future and really supporting some of these technologies of the future that is key to the success of the organization. Last aspect that I want to include in my introductory remark is organization readiness. A lot of time we aspire to be an organization that can take advantage of AI ML capabilities. But if the organization is culturally not ready to take benefit or advantage or adopt the experience that will create the change that's required to build the foundation that's needed, both from a process perspective, technology perspective, and people perspective, it becomes the biggest impediment for organization to be successful in their objective of deploying true AI ML capabilities. So again, that's very important that a lot of times we forget about the organization readiness, but that culture change, the business sponsorship is very key and in terms of adoption experience that we can create through capabilities. Back to you, Richard.
Thanks, Manish. Obviously, I think many of us are familiar with the statistics that organizations that embrace digital technology, and even more so these days, AI, ML, and manage their data effectively, their values, market values, are 50% in many cases greater than organizations that do not embrace these technologies, and their ability to respond to the dynamic world that we live in is significantly enhanced. But as Manish and Tom indicated, the ability to take advantage of those technologies, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to align, assess, and design a solution for those enterprises. So we'll talk a bit more about that. And the solution needs to be broader than technology and impact on the process, but also how it impacts the people and the organization, as Manish just articulated. So thank you, Manish. Good insights. Thank you, Tom. Over to Sam. Sam is, as I said, an innovator. And he's an innovator in many ways, but he is obviously an innovator in the IT operations. So Sam, give us a perspective of what you're seeing as you implement your AI technology, and more broadly, as you support many of your clients in their automation journey, and what are some of the challenges and lessons learned that you'd like to communicate to the team? And obviously through the Q&A, we'll dig a bit deeper into the discussion. So over to you, Sam.
Yeah, thank you so much, Richard. So, Tom and Manish both really talked about kind of reimagining the future of how "quote unquote" work gets done, and I have felt for many years as I've worked in this field that the core of what we're doing with AI and ML is really about how we are creating digital labor. At the end of the day, all the things that Manish and Tom kind of talk about are doable. They're doable today with people and with processes and with technology, and that's how we've delivered it for a long time. So now the question is, what can we do to supercharge it? How can we take humans out of the loop? How can we make machines smarter? How can we build machines that can emulate the thinking process, the decision-making process, the cognitive processes that humans ordinarily contribute to, I'll say, the business workflow. And in fact, there are, a slew of technologies that we've really been, they're not new technologies. They've been in development since the 70s and the 80s. It's just that there was no commercial embracement of these. They were kind of considered science projects rather than real work tools. And all of that has changed. And kind of under the umbrella of digital transformation, that's kind of how the industry thinks about it. We think about digital transformation. We have a whole umbrella of technologies that fit underneath that. And within that umbrella also sits something called AI. And I think one important comment that I always like to make, I think it's important just to get set in your mind, is that AI is an umbrella term for a bunch of different technologies that have a bunch of different capabilities and very specific capabilities, right? Today, we really don't have fully general AIs. We have kind of fit-for-purpose AIs. And so that's kind of important. But here's the bottom line. If we can get through this question of what is digital transformation, and then we can get through what are these various AI technologies, and how do I apply them, the right solution to the right problem, then the question that I think still comes back to all of us is, as we are deploying technologies that operate at machine speed, we're still trying to support them with people and processes that only run at human speed. And so that's a significant impedance mismatch, which has to be addressed in the market. We, as a rule, should not, not that we listen to ourselves, but we should not be deploying technologies for which we do not have clear observability, clear management, and clear operational technologies. And the only way to manage everything from RPA to AI is to build machines that can operate, manage, observe, respond to these digital technologies as quickly as they execute. So I always like to bring not only, as part of a conversation, not only the promise of what can be achieved, and by the way, I would probably say, the mandate for businesses to begin to understand this, begin to get the help, begin to embrace it, to be able to deploy it, but not to repeat the missteps of the past, where we so often have rolled out technologies not understanding the management framework, not understanding how to operationalize it, and kind of getting to that when we cross that bridge. I believe, that understanding a full framework of how do you identify what challenges you have, how do you identify correctly which technologies to bring to bear as a solution, but also how to actually make it production ready in the enterprise so that the benefits are not hit and miss, but they're reliable, and everything in the framework is aligned not only at the same velocity, but using the same smarts. I've asked for years why it is that technology, the IT department, and the technology they use often trails what the business units are using. And so that's kind of the framework that I'd like to lay out for those of you to think about. And hopefully we'll have an opportunity to have a spirited conversation around not only the simplicity of thought that Tom Peach brings to it, the depth of thinking that Manish brings to what does it take to do it, but also what does it take to really make this technology really production ready. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Sam. You know, at Silvertree, we have a methodology called Silver Catalyst where we do align, assess, design, implement, and manage. And we found that if you don't consider all of those processes and that framework from end to end, you're really having, you're really taking a crapshoot as to whether you're going to be successful near term and long term. And it seems like every time we get involved in a engagement, one of those steps hasn't been thought through as part of the strategic execution, the strategy execution of the major transformational event. So it's interesting that you come at it from that perspective. I would say, you know, as you said, Sam, just to pile on, you know, if we treat it as digital labor, labor has to be trained, maintained, and managed ongoingly as things change. And as a result, we need to make sure we plan for that as it relates to our digital labor using AI and ML. So well said, Sam. Now we've got a question. And by the way, this is all about Q&A. So, you know, we've got the opening comments and we're going to dive into it. And I'm going to ask them some questions if the audience doesn't, but I much prefer using the audience questions. So we have one, and I want to thank Nancy. Let me read the question, and then I'm going to ask Sam and Manish to initially respond. And Tom, you can feel free to pile on as you see fit. So look, the question is, COVID-19 seemed to accelerate adoption of AI from vaccines to supply chain capabilities. What did you observe related to this disruption, and what do you believe the future of AI and life sciences might look like in the next 3 to 5 years? It's interesting, Nancy, I actually told the guys to be prepared to speak to what they thought would happen in the next 3 to 5 years. And here the first question is right out the gate is on that. So great question. Sam, over to you, and then Manish and Tom, feel free to comment as you see fit. Sam.
Yeah, so when we kind of think back around major eras of technology, there's probably two ways to look at it. Number one, over all these years, nothing has changed. It's still a 0 and a 1, and still process one instruction at a time. Another way of looking at it were some of the great technology shifts that we had. I argue that those two shifts were first the introduction of the relational database, which in fact influences the architecture, the look and feel, the way we interact with data in the workplace. And then I would say that the second major shift was webification and the graphic user interface. And so I would argue that as many things as you can think of that have passed, you know, we could talk about Ethernet, we could just go on with a whole list of technologies, and they all were impactful, right? The internet, you know, of course, right? So many things we can pick. But when we think about how we do work in the workplace, I would argue that relational database, graphic user interface, and I would argue now today, AI and the various techniques of AI that live on this massive amount of data that we have built. And that will influence, as did relational databases and GUI, everything that we see in the next 3 to 5 years. And the speed with which our technology methodologies, our selected technologies, our technology base, the technologies that we exploit, the speed with which we exploit this will occur at a speed which is commensurate with not the past, but what we've been experiencing since we've been thinking about, mobile and internet and all the things, the whole smack stack. So what will the future hold? I think the short-term future, in my view, is actually going to hold challenges, and we see those today. You mentioned in your question as 2 examples, life and also supply chain. Well, we know that the benefits of life sciences occur without a supply chain that supports it. And so I think the early part of what we see in the next 3 to 5 years is actually going to be certain challenges around kind of everything being embraced and everything being equal and everything operating together. However, perhaps if you go to the outside of that 5 years, I will tell you that nothing from life sciences, whether it's the 300,000 pages of a BLA or any of the methodologies that we use to assess data, life sciences for clinical trials, those will not look the same. And I will tell you that not only did we start talking about supply chain and then smart supply chain, but talking about adaptable supply chain. So I think, my advice to anyone listening to this is fasten your seatbelt. Think about things that Richard said in terms of really understanding all the steps in a framework that you need to be successful, and really getting moving, because if not, your competition's going to pass you. That's what's happening today. We're a born in the cloud company. I didn't have any of the kind of backwards compatibility or anything issues that companies 1,000 times the size of mine have. And we were able to use AI to create digital labor and actually do the work that humans have done in our industry for the last 30 years, do it with digital labor, do it with AI. And by the way, if you kind of think about what we do, we build bots that keep your bots running, fix your bots. So nothing is beyond the imagination today, and innovative companies that also have the intestinal fortitude and the resources to go for this need to do it. And that's exactly what you see Tom doing, and that's exactly what you see Manish doing.
So Manish and Tom, let's keep the answers brief, because we want to get to more than one question, but this is a good one. So,
no, I will add just a couple of more points to what Sam said, just in the context of healthcare and life science and AI/ML. If you think about it, really the diagnostic of the problem and how quickly you diagnose the problem and understand the root cause helps to stop the prolongedness and the impact of that problem. In simple way, if you think about it, what the inside data combined with AI/ML will bring and continue to bring in especially healthcare life sciences, how it can be leveraged to diagnose the problem faster, so that really it can be stopped, it can be cured, it can be really, the impact of it could be minimized. I think one of the things we have learned through pandemic is, how important the sample size of the data is, whether it comes to vaccine, whether it comes to understanding all the ways a pandemic or virus can really take different shapes, turns, and how do you put control around it. If you take that into other areas, other problems, already there are many AI ML platforms in play today that is working to see how they can really substitute and really bring better insights for the doctors, for medical professionals in terms of diagnosing the problem, in terms of curing the problem. I think where we have what we'll see over next 3 to 5 years is reducing the error margin that exists in many of those platforms that exist out there that can really make our healthcare system much more effective and efficient and really addresses some of these problems in a timely fashion. So speed, agility, as we talked about earlier, and diagnosing the problem faster to bring right cure is going to be the key and big change in the future.
Tom, any comment?
Yeah, just real fast. So Nancy, it's a great question. You talk about life sciences, but I'd say supply chain affects all of us. So in the insurance industry, it's labor, right? So there's a war for talent, and so we're also trying to upskill our talent, move ourselves upwards because there's just a scarcity of it. AI, things like that. How do we move those lower level tasks to a more of a knowledge worker is absolutely key, not only just now, but it's really a premium because we've got people working remote. So you're missing the whole organizational culture aspects of it. But we're really being impacted by the supply chain aspect of your question, in that there's just not enough people, there's gaps in the labor force, and we're trying to close those gaps with AI and ML. And we're doing, and we'll get into it a little bit more with another question, but it's just so much data that needs to be pressed and pushed around efficiently. That's where I think that's where, from my industry, where the game's going to be played.
Just to add to this, we have sadly a blessing that will help us design approaches to future challenges such as this pandemic. In the previous pandemics we've had, we probably did not have the sophistication to collect the data and the insights that this pandemic is forcing us to as a result of its mutation cycle. So there's a lot of data and a lot of, you might say, lessons learned that is coming from this pandemic. We're starting to work with a university system on how they take advantage of the insights they get from various cancer research that they've done, and how to apply AI technology to that, such that, as someone said, the clinical trial aspect is very specifically reduced and targeted more so than generalized, such that you have, as Manish said, a higher degree of statistical accuracy based upon a targeted clinical trial versus a broad clinical trial. And decisions are made very quickly on that. So, the power is we have the ability to collect the data. Those of us that go back to, I was the CI at Nortel for a while, and we used to have this term called Moore's Law. And Moore's Law says that every 18 months, processing power of computer technology will double. So think about a world where the AI engines and ML engines are every 18 months, the speed and the power of those engines are doubling. That's pretty exciting if you think about it. And I can only imagine how it will affect all of us, and specifically things like life sciences that touch every one of us. So I think we're going to see speed to cure, speed to delivery enhanced very specifically by the lessons that were learned and applying this technology and the associated improvements from it. So look forward to seeing that. Look forward to what the future has to hold. Next question from the audience. I want to thank Phil. Businesses and people are hesitant to adopting AI and ML technologies today. How do you see AI, ML being regulated by governments to ensure AI, ML technologies are being built for the good rather than bad? Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Phil. Let's answer this live. I'd like to go to Tom. Your perspective, because you work in a regulated industry.
Yeah.
I mean, so you have a good perspective on that. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you for the question as well. So in our industry, the AI technologies are not as regulated. The end product's regulated in the insurance aspect, making sure that there's not price gouging in the contracts, so those things are right. But how you get it done is not highly regulated at this point. Now, clearly, what is really highly regulated are the cyber activities and things like that. That's where we're getting a lot of pressure from our regulators these days. But for the most part, I have to tell you that I feel that we're actually being pushed by our regulators to have better data, to have better efficiencies around the data, to have a better situation that way. But we have not been dictated at this point to regulate the use of AI or ML technologies, at least in the insurance industry at this point.
Yeah, I was going to ask Tom to that. Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I think it also depends on which country you're talking about. So I would say, in that regard, US is more liberal compared to some of the European countries. And to Tom's point, I think data is in certain countries more regulated, more to make sure that doesn't intrude individual privacy or personal information or client information, making sure it's protected and how it's being used and how it's being consumed does not, raises the risk exposure. So it varies by country to country. I think as we look forward in terms of how the information is actually being consumed, how it's being used, I think those regulation will continue to evolve, change, and it will vary by country to country depending on their specific country risk posture and local laws.
Yeah. Sam, feel free to comment, but I think what Manish just touched upon is the key here. It's very difficult to regulate a technology such as AI and ML because the pace of power, as I articulated with the Moore's Law comment, is going to continue to grow. And the good guys and the bad guys are going to have access to that technology. But where the society can make decisions is regulating on how personal data, health data is used. And, I'll just use an example. What Apple did without any regulatory by saying, hey, you have to authorize the social media companies to use your data, I think is a first step. We had a technology company doing that as a way of saying, hey, we want to give the user choice in how their data is consumed and used, because they're creating marketing platforms for the social media companies, Google, Facebook, and so forth, and they should have a choice in that. I think we're going to see GDPR, more GDPR, what Europe has done, regulations in the United States, and I think we're going to see our Congress having to address. They target the social media organizations, but really, that's, in my opinion, fool's folly. What they have to target is how the social media organizations use the data that they collect of the individuals and the companies. When they do that, they have the power.
Yeah, and Richard, just to back that up, back to Phil's point, there are considerable regulations, with the California Consumer Protection Act, right. Those types of things about making sure that data is protected, and things like that. So again, where's the level of internal use versus, using that data for other purposes? That's highly regulated, and it's becoming much more. My answer was more on the inside of the organization of the use. The proprietary information, we're just not regulated yet there.
That's it. And I think, more companies are going to be making choices and instructing how their data is used by their partners, by their by the marketplace. And I think individuals are going to be given more choice. And I think that's healthy, and I think it's needed. So yeah, Richard, just a point of view, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
When I'm kind of engaged in one of these dialogues around, white hat AI and black hat AI, I think that it's always helpful. You know, those conversations are very often driven by discussions around bias and algorithms.
Right.
And and then, of course, you know, what the objective of a particular AI would be. And, you know, we seem to hold it out in this special category because we don't understand it. I would argue that we'll be having the same discussions around quantum computing, as quantum computing will change all of the security frameworks and methodologies that we use today. So, you know, how is quantum computing any different from AI? And actually, you and Tom have really been talking about it. What is not well understood about AI is not necessarily some code that we write in Python or whatever, Lisp. AI is really, artificial intelligence occurs at the data level. And AI will use different data representations that we're accustomed to. And then those data representations will give way to different ways of understanding that data and deriving knowledge out of it, machine learning. So I think it's really important to kind of understand that that AI lives at the data layer, and it really comes down to the data that you collect and you use. And using AI for you know, black hat types of objectives basically means that those people have acquired data that can be used to derive that AI from. So the big deal comes down to data. It comes down to what are the, you know, kind of what are our data morals around that? How do we de-identify data in the use of any AI becomes really important. And so those types of standards, there's a lot of standards bodies that are talking about it today. I think it's like any new technology, the internet needed to be managed, right? The internet is being used for bad things. So I wouldn't necessarily, you know, kind of hang my hat on everything that we kind of read around it. I would think about, once again, in a framework, you know, what are the standards and practices that we need to have? Practice safe computing.
Thank you, Sam. So thank you, Phil, for a excellent question, and one on many of our minds, right, and how we move forward. Encourage the audience to ask other questions. You can tell we get jazzed by the questions we get from the audience. You know, I'd like, while we wait for the next question from the audience, you know, I'd like to just make a comment and then ask for the panel to speak to it. Many think that AI is a single technology, and there's a lot of noise out there. But as we talked, AI and ML is constantly evolving, and for the most part, we have found, and I'd like for the panelists to comment, that AI and ML technology is really purpose built. It's general technology, but it has to be specifically built to address a particular solution type, and it has to be particularly built on a set of data elements, whether structured or unstructured, to give you repeatable outcomes. So give us some thoughts about, given this world, this new world order, if you will, we use that term, of AI and ML, and so many different solutions that are available out there for enterprises, how they may approach making the right decision on selecting a AI or ML platform, given they have a lot of choice out there and a lot of hype that purposely confuses potential buyers. So I'd like to start with Tom, then Manish, and back to you, Sam, because you are specifically applying technologies to specific problems. So Tom, Manish, and then Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I'd say the first thing out of the gate is what drives our decision, and I think everybody has to think about this first and forefront, is data quality. What type of data do you have? So if you're dealing with third-party type data aspects, you're going to have to use a certain technology. But let me go a little bit broader. We actually use a lot of more enhanced scanning technologies with a lot of bot technologies, with a lot of third-party augmentation of that. So it's kind of this triumvirate that we use in our current organization to build up basically a fast flow submission situation that would come into play. And our game is being played again, I start off with data quality, and I'll say it probably 3 more times. Is the higher the quality, the more you can deal with it. So you're only dealing with as good as the data that's coming in the door. But we actually use a lot of bots. You heard Sam talk about it. We just use it a lot, and there's a lot of things you can do with it. You can put some logic around it. You can do plenty of things like that. We did talk about artificial intelligence a lot when it comes to bringing extra data in as well. There's a lot of good data that's socially you can get. We can buy it, you can do it, and that helps augment it. But again, you wrap it all within our either our bot technology, or we have some data cleansers and things like that is basically what we would use. I started off my discussion, and I'll turn it back over to you, Richard, is about efficiencies, right? It's about speed. So that's what we're looking for, at least in the insurance industry, is get that information from raw data to production data as fast as we possibly can. Let me turn it. Is that anything else on that, Richard? That makes sense?
I liked it, Tom. You basically came back to the foundational element. I want Manish and Sam to pile on as they see fit, but what you said is you have to pick your AI or ML or your automation technology based upon the quality of data and the associated processes. And I also like your thought about using ML and AI technology to bring in additional data and insights that the business can take advantage of. So good insights, Tom. Manish, over to you.
Yep. Thanks, Richard. So apart from what Tom said, I would say one thing you have to realize that more and more enterprise platforms that's in the market today that we are deploying are coming with native AI capabilities, right? So if you look at whether it's a CRM platform, whether it's workflow platform, whether it's other low-code, no-code platform, they are coming with more and more native capabilities. It's an essential capability for these enterprise platform and big selling point so that you don't have to go and build another custom solution on top of it. Of course, it will rely upon the point Tom mentioned, which is basically how do you make the most out of it is start with an area where you have quality data, governed, managed, which can bring the insight predictability that's needed. And you have a defined, a re-engineered business process that brings simplification to the outcome that you want to get out of it and really apply there and then expand and build upon in other areas. But I would start with really the native capabilities, especially if you have already invested in the enterprise capability, make the most out of it, and then figure out where else you need to bring in other bots capability that are specifically just focused on the AI ML capability outside of what the native platform brings.
Good stuff, Manish. Sam, over to you.
Yeah, wow. I think this is really one of the most important discussions that we're having today when we really talk about AI and ML, which is really how do you simplify the thought of AI for the enterprise? And I think Manish talks about one of those, which is actually very near and dear to my heart, which is the concept of fit-for-purpose AI versus generalized AIs. And so let me kind of take a couple points out of that. Just for our group today, some people consider chatbots, which is fundamentally semantic AIs, as an AI, and arguably it is. I would argue that not a tremendously intelligent form of AI. Although Google is doing some amazing work in that space, far beyond anything that anybody else is doing. So chatbots could be considered AI, but they're a very simplified version of AI. The other flavor of AI that we all talk about is, oh, do you have machine learning in your systems? And so machine learning is another technique. It's actually an independent technique. It has very little to do with the way that chatbots are built and the types of technology that's used therein. But the challenge around machine learning is it does go back to your data, and it's important to understand that if you run any data set through standard machine learning classification and clustering, you will get an answer. And that's why Tom talks about why the data is so important, because if you put bad data into it, you will still get an answer, and the answer will be skewed. But then, then we get into some more kinds of interesting types of AI, which is what we really think in our head is AI, where AI is just acting on people's behalf. And we see that in some of the advanced AIs, that are being used for autonomous vehicles or humanoid robots. And even within those, they're using multiple types of AI. So computer vision is an entirely different type of AI from machine learning and chatbots, and that's being used very heavily in business today for kind of optical character recognition, but more importantly, semantic understanding. But all of these technologies that I've really talked about still fundamentally deliver information to humans, depending on humans to leverage their cognitive capabilities to make decisions about that data. And whether you're making all the decisions or some of the decisions, there's still human in the loop. I think that one of the most interesting areas in AI is really behavioral AIs, which are AIs that can emulate decision-making, human cognitive decision-making. And that's where we start to get into some of the real power. It's also where we start to get scared, because we're no longer in control. We're letting a machine do it. It's kind of like, no, I'm sorry, Hal, I can't do that for you. But, there's clearly different types of AI. It is a journey, understanding that there are different types of AI, and they each solve different problems. It creates a pathway for people to kind of chip away at the outside. Like, you don't have to jump into the pool with your whole body, but you can dip your toe in and begin to see those benefits. But it's really important to understand not all AI is created equal. A great way to get started is what Manish recommended, which is fit-for-purpose tools that do one thing and one thing only, or two things, or three things, or five things. But there's no single anything that you're just going to plug in and it's just going to do whatever you want. So I always like to break that down for people. I think it's really important. And, I don't know, Manish, Tom, if you share my views, if you have any thoughts around that.
Let's do this. I'd like to, we've got 3 questions from the audience, and we're not going to get them all in. So I want to answer one, and you guys can pile on, and then turn what I think is a very powerful question. It's about the people component over to the panel. So an anonymous attendee asked, how can an organization best determine what parts of your business can benefit from implementing AI and ML? What we have found is, first, there needs to be a high degree of consistency in how the data can be interpreted. There needs to be a fair volume of transactions, if you will, or decision making that needs to occur. Because the reason for that is you need to have a business case, and you don't want to start with you want to start with an easy win. But I will also say, as you've heard from this panel, you have to also choose the right AI technology platform to enable whatever that process may be, depending upon your industry segment, can be automated. And that decision-making process cannot be taken lightly. So not only understand what processes that have transaction types and data sets that lend itself to a high degree of business value and efficiency, but also make sure you can find the right AI platform that you have a high degree of confidence, or ML platform that can act intelligently and be maintained effectively on that data set and those transaction types. Any comment about that? I don't want to go too deep into that, but if hopefully the panel agrees, or I would think, given our discussion, you guys agree with that perspective, but just comment and let's move on quickly, right? All right, then I basically told them the answer, so they're saying okay. All right, so good for me. So let's go to the last question of for the panel, and this is a good one, and it's about the people. I'm under the impression many companies that claim that there is not enough talent to hire in the AI ML field don't have enough work for data scientists to do. Their data scientists end up doing a lot of reporting work. They hire data scientists with AI ML skills to whom they don't have AI ML projects to work on. I think what they're saying is there's a lot of hype out there, but the people that are being hired are really not doing those high-end projects. And what may be the challenge there with the talent, as well as leveraging the talent in an effective way for a successful AI and ML project. So I'll open it up. Manish, why don't you start? Then Tom and Sam, and we got to close this off. We're running late, so let's be succinct. Over to you, team. All right.
Thanks, Richard. I'll keep it very simple. Organizations that are currently undergoing transformation, and AI ML is their strategic objective. It's about really some of the things that we heard through the conversation about quality data, whether using native capabilities or custom capabilities from AI ML perspective. If those are the priorities, which I understand from all the conversations I've been having, is in huge demand out there. There's not enough workers to really suffice the need of the marketplace today. My simple answer to you would be is I'm not aware of which organization you're referring to, but if you are aware of qualified data scientists who are looking to do actual data scientist work, please send them my way.
Well done, Manish. Tom, over to you.
And I think the question is also an organizational maturity situation. So back to the earlier question we talked about, where is AI in the next 3 to 5 years? If it's not part of a strategic plan view, then I think that there's a big missing cog in those organizations that play it out. So yep, there are organizations that will start and stop and hit or miss. I think we're in the precipice of a massive situation. We've been in this position for a while. I think it's starting to break through.
Well said, Tom. Sam?
I'll tie up with, there used to be a saying that said the meek shall inherit the earth. It's not true. The mathematicians shall inherit the earth. And I would tell you that when you see a bunch of data scientists doing reporting, what they're really doing is data wrangling. And the reason they're doing data wrangling is that none of the data that they got their hands on is integral enough to be able to use. So I think that the data scientists that are doing reporting are victims, and they're victims of the underlying systems processes. When you look at the percentage of data which is entered by humans with their fingertips and therefore flawed by human factors, that'll bring you to the root cause.
Thank you, Sam. I would just pile on, and I can't resist. I think it ties back to the organizational maturity that Tom indicated. I think if you as a data scientist are deciding to take a job with a enterprise or a service provider, make sure that they are committed to productization of, if you're interested in being part of an AI program, productization of their AI capability, and make it systemically embedded in their operation, or you will be disappointed. Many organizations tout that they are committed to that, but they really don't have the IT organization and the business aligned. So the IT organization is trying to get ahead of the business. But I will say the most success in AI and ML technology is when you have the IT organization working hand in glove with the business, driving transformation because you're solving a business challenge, like in Tom's world, the ability to pursue policy or opportunities that may be low valued but low risk. I mean, low value in numbers, but also low risk, so very profitable. Having the ability to make those decisions without investing in labor is highly valuable. But that only comes from tight alignment between the business and IT. And I encourage you to make sure if you're a data scientist before you join a company, that you are confident that the business and IT are absolutely aligned on the vision and the strategy that they're going to move the organization forward with. And if you do, then you'll have a high probability of being successful. If you don't, then you're probably going to be relegated to doing reporting, as Sam and the team indicated, until sometime that they do come together and drive a transformational program. So we have run out of time. And I have truly appreciated the audience questions, and I know this panel has. And I hope this has been tremendously insightful for the audience. This is all about for you, the audience. So we will make sure that we get back to those that have not gotten their answers to their questions. Feel free to ask any questions and submit questions offline, and we as the panel we'll make sure we respond back to you through the NC Tech Association. I want to thank the NC Tech Association for giving us the opportunity to have this session, and I hope that it has been valuable and insightful for all of you that participated today. I want to thank my panel of my good friends and absolute industry leaders of Manish, Tom, and Sam. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for how insightful you were in the discussion. So we greatly appreciate it, and we look to future sessions like this. Emily, back to you.
Thanks so much, Richard, and everyone, panel. I have saved the questions you didn't have time for, so I'll get your input before I send a follow-up with the recording to all attendees today. Thank you for presenting this workshop, sponsoring this workshop today, Silvertree Consulting and Services, and we have a lot more in store this year still, so check out the events calendar for more offerings, and I hope you'll have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.